Today we're going to make a really fun 22-inch square decorative pillow. I'm going to be using embroidery designs from the Bookish Project series by Kimberbell. This is going to use up 4 of the bonus designs. You need all 3 of the project kits to make the pillow as shown. Let's go through the designs I'll be using. First, let's start with the Petals and Prose book cover. Need just one more chapter applique, 5x7. I'm doing the 5x7 hoop size for all of these. Out of the Blossoms and Bouquet bookmarks kit, I've got 2 designs. The Shh, I'm Reading applique, that's what this one looks like. And the Sorry, I'm Booked applique. From the Bookish Coasters kit, I'll be using the 5x7 I'd Rather Be Reading applique. What are you going to need? Pillow form. This is a 22-inch pillow form. If they still make this kind, I'll link it below. I really like these. I've used them several times. They're very squishy, and they say they're hypoallergenic, and they're squishy, but they're firm. They are great. I'm going to put this pillow in my chair where I read and I stitch. I'm making this project out of scraps. I have these white with random size dots, just oddball cut sizes from quilts. I'm going to start with a 14.5-inch square. That's the largest size that I can get for all these pieces. That's a lot more than I'm going to need. As I trim down later in the video, we can figure out what the smallest size will be. I've got 4 fabric squares, 14.5 inches. So why cut them so big if I know I'm going to trim them down? I'm going to be putting it in an embroidery hoop. I want some extra. And it's scrap fabric. This is a put it together on the fly, I can see it in my head kind of project. I did draw out some sketches, which are horrible, so we're just going to work on it together and see what happens. I'm going to find the center of all my squares. The easy way to do that if you don't want to measure. Fold in half again, increase it and get my center point. I've got the center of my fabric. I'm going to put a small piece of this paper tape on it, and then use the water-soluble pen and put a dot, approximately where the center is. The reason I'm doing that is I need to know where the center of this fabric is to help me center it when I hoop. For the fabric applique, I've got some Holt fabric scraps here that I'm going to use. I've got half a jelly roll left of the stitch collection, including some of these small cutoffs. If you've got tiny pieces of fabric like this, that'll be great. A lot of the fabric pieces needed are small. There are a couple that are bigger that need to be 5.5 to 6 inches. This is the Mercantile. I've used this for several projects. Anything bigger I need, I'll pull from this stack. I've got all my fabrics prepped. I'll be using the 5x7 hoop, white mesh cutaway stabilizer, and my white background fabric. As I'm hooping my fabric, I've got my little dot for the center. Your hoop has some, at least mine does, these notches can help you find the center. This doesn't have to be totally centered. I know I'm going to cut this down. Always hand tighten and then tighten with your screwdriver. Make sure everything's in nice and tight, nice and flat. I'll stitch one together with you on camera, and then the other ones I'll just show when they're done. If you'd like to see a more detailed tutorial on hooping fabric, how to stitch applique, anything like that, please leave it in the comments below and let me know. These are the thread colors in the instructions. I'm not doing any purple. I've pulled my own colors. I'll be matching them as I go. This is a good one to start with. We're going to have a placement line, then we're going to place our fabric, have a tack down, trim the stitch line, and do the decorative outline. I'll do this first one on camera. That'll show you how to stitch the placement, place your fabric, trim, and do the decorative outline. So you'll see an example of applique, and then the rest I'll go ahead and stitch, and I'll put it on the screen with music. And then after this design is stitched out, I will go ahead and finish the other 3 off camera, and we'll move on to assembling the project. chapter 5x7 hoop size. I'm going to go ahead and stitch out the other 3 bonus designs I picked, and then we'll move on to assembling our project. Here are all 4 of the bonus designs stitched out. They all came out great. We're going to go ahead and work on assembling our pillow. I'm working with a 22-inch pillow form. So each of these blocks I'm going to want to trim to 8.5 inches. It's going to give me a 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side. Then to form the patchwork in between the blocks and around the blocks, you're going to want to cut 57 2.5-inch squares. Now I need to trim up my block. If I knew ahead of time I wanted this 8.5 inches square, I could have cut my background fabric to 8.5, centered my design on my hoop and let it stitch out, and I would be done. But since I went with an oversized piece, I'm working with scraps, I need to trim it down. This ruler is 8.5 inches wide. That makes this very convenient for me. It also has a center line. I'm hoping you can see it, and there's a little crosshair. There it is, right there. So there's a center line here and here. I can use this and center and cut my pieces, so I'll have 8.5 this way, and then center and cut, and I'll have 8.5 that way. If you don't have a ruler, that's the right size. There's a couple of options. One of the easiest ones would be if you have a square ruler. You can put tape along the 8.5 inch line. This helps create that visual square for you, so you can visually center it, and you would do your trimming. Oops. You would do your trimming and then flip your piece and then do your trimming. If you don't have that kind of ruler, you can measure. You can use a tape measure or regular ruler, find the center point of your design, and measure out from each of your points. Let's trim this one together and we'll see if it works. I want to find the center of my design, and I'm going to cut the sides off, and then I'll flip it and do it the other way. The easiest way for me to find the center is to fold it in half. I've got the book binding side here, or book cover sides in here. So if you match these two against each other, I'm going to go ahead and put it back down on the table so I can do that. And I'm going to press just so I have a visual line. I can see the fold line. I'm using that ruler. That's 8.5. I'm going to find that center line, which is 4 1/4. So if you're using a regular ruler, look for a 4 1/4 line. I'm going to line that up right along my fold line. Now I will tell you, if you don't get this perfect, it's a pillow. Don't stress about it. It's going to look good. You're going to like it. You're going to enjoy it, and it's going to look fantastic. Have fun, enjoy what you're doing, and don't stress. I have that 4 1/4 line lined up on the fold line. I'm going to go ahead and cut. Close your blade. To cut the other side, you can flip it and rotate it. I'm going to turn around this way. I'm standing way over there, so I'm not going to cut myself. Make sure, though, hold that ruler. There we go. Got the end cut. Don't ever cut, like if you're cutting this way, I moved out of the way. Don't like cut here and stand here so you could accidentally hit yourself. That's bad. I've got this side done. I'm going to fold this in half again, find the center of my design, line it up, and trim the extra. The top of this design, the highest point, is the top of this flower. and the lowest point is the bottom of the text. So I'm going to use those 2 points as my reference. Let's find the top of that flower. And it's a little hard because you got all that fabric, but you just need to make a reference line. Top of the flower, bottom of the text. You just want to get a rough idea of what's your halfway point. It's about there. All right, I've got enough of a line to see it. And again, this does not have to be perfect. I'm going to look for that center marking on this ruler, which is at 4 1/4. Line that up. That looks straight. If it's not straight, it's still going to look good. Stand out of the way. You can also do this on a rotating cutting mat if you happen to have one. 8 1/2 inches. I'm going to do this for the rest of my blocks, and I'm also going to go back and do a quick iron just to get the creases out. I don't want the creases in them. Here's the back of my piece. I used the light mesh cutaway. I think I'm going to leave it on. It's very soft. It's going to give this a little more stability. I did notice I had a little bit of puckering. I could have put the fusible backing on this white and then used the light mesh cutaway in my hoop. That might have helped. I also could have starched this fabric a little heavier. But again, this project is going to be a pillow. So when you stuff it, it's going to pull, it's going to pop, it's going to look fantastic. Let's cut the rest of our blocks and iron them, and then we'll move on to the next step. Here's all my embroidered blocks. It really helped ironing them, and I used a little bit of a light spray starch, and I actually used my mini iron and kind of got in. I had some puckering in here, and I got the little tiny iron in here and got that puckering to flatten out. So take a few minutes and press them. And the next thing we need to do is make all the little squares and build our borders. Start with your block placement. I decided, since this book and this book has the same fabric for pages, I didn't want them next to each other, so I placed them opposite, and then I dropped the other 2 blocks in. Next, you want to cut some squares. I'm using 2 1/2 inch squares. You have 8 1/2 inch blocks, which will finish at 8 inches. So if you're cutting 2 1/2 inch squares, they'll finish at 2 inches. So this is essentially 8 inches square, and 4 of these are 8 inches. You'll need to border each side with 4, but then you'll need an extra, because when you sew it all together, you need that corner piece. Here's your layout. You have the corner. That's a 1. You've got 4 squares here, 1 square here, 4 square here, 1 square here. And you've got 4, 4, 4, etc. I went ahead and added all the way across. You need 57 squares. How did I come up with this layout? We're making a 22-inch pillow. These are the finished sizes. This is excluding my seam allowance. Our blocks that we cut at 8 1/2, when they're sewn in with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, they're going to be 8. So your numbers, measurement wise, not count wise, going across and up and down, will need to be 22. Let's look at this row. These are going to be 2 inches. This is 8 inches. This is going to be 2 inches, this width. This is 8 inches, and this is 2 inches. So you have 2 plus 8 is 10, and you have another 2 plus 8, which is 10. So you've got 20, and add the 2, and you get 22. Let's go across the top. We can use the middle or the top, it doesn't matter. So we've calculated across the top, I need 11 squares to fit. If they're 2 inches, they're going to finish at 22 when we sew them all together. Once you have everything laid out, take a picture. That way If stuff moves or gets blown off the table, you can lay it back out. There's a couple ways you can sew this. You can go across or top to bottom. I'm going to go across. I'll go ahead and put in either a video or pictures of each step as I go. Here's the first row I sewed together with the embroidery blocks. I just wanted to show you when I go to press these, I'm going to press toward the patchwork. Because this is white, if I press this way, you'll see it through. It wants to go that way anyway because I left the stabilizer on the back. So press, especially if you have white, press it to the patchwork. Press your light toward the dark. Now that everything is sewn going across, you can sew everything top to bottom. Attach that, this to the middle row to this row, and the bottom. Let's put our pillow top together. We've got everything sewn together. I've got this on my cutting mat. It has a ruler. Let's look. We're about 22 inches. It can be a little more, it can be a little less. It's a pillow. It'll work. We're going to attach some trim. These are the Simplicity palms. Here's all the measurements. I get this online. I like to make pillows, so I buy the big thing. You can buy it from quilt shops and craft stores by the yard. You don't have to buy this much at once. I'm going to show you how to attach it. You're going to want to stitch it down with the palms facing in. So when you flip your pillow right side out, they'll go to the outside. I like to stitch these down and then put the pillow backing on. Some people do it all in one step. I find this works better for me. So I will stitch all of this down and show you what it looks like, and then we'll make our pillow back. So normally when I sew, I've got this guide foot and it's got the little ledge for 1/4 inch. When I go to sew these palms on, it's really tight and I don't want to sew over these, so I switch to the regular foot without the guide. That way I don't catch the palms and I don't mess up my seam allowance. All the trim is sewn down. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to grab one of my corners. It's not perfect. See how it's a little bit bunchy? It's a pillow. It's okay. Seam allowance, not perfect. Here I noticed the yellow square happened to be a little bit shorter than the neighboring 2 squares. So I kept the pom-pom trim going straight. It's not going to matter. It's a pillow. And this is a fun project. You can push your trim and make sure it's all adjusted if you like. But we want to keep everything folded to the middle. We're going to do an envelope back for our pillow. For my backing, I'm using a print from the Hush Hush 2 line. Here's the pattern number. I believe it's called Sweet Spools. They look like little spools of thread. When this was released a while ago, I got a bolt of it because I liked it and I thought it would be good for backgrounds and backings. I've cut 2 pieces. They're just on top of each other here. 22 by 15. What I'm going to do is fold and press probably a couple inches in, and then that's going to be where the overlap is. So I'll do that and then I'll come back to the table and show you. Here's my 2 pieces. I went ahead and went in about 1.5 inches and I pressed it. What's going to happen when you put it on the back, these will overlap. So you want to have clean edges. Now I cut 15 by 22. You just need to have enough to overlap in the center and have that clean edge. I probably cut more than enough, but I'm erring on the side of caution since I'm doing this as I go. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and I'm going to go ahead and put a nice stitch line on each side of these so that it'll look finished from the back, and then we'll attach it to the back of our pillowcase. You want to grab your pillow top, grab your first half backing. This folded piece goes toward the center. Make sure your right side's together. Just like that. Now, I highly recommend pinning, especially if you put the pom-pom trim on, because you need to make sure that it holds down and you don't accidentally, do this and sew over a pom-pom, which I've done. So put half on, pin, pin, and pin. And if you want, you can sew half at a time. Or if you like, get your other half and you're lining up along the outsides and the bottom. Okay, I'm doing this one-handed, I'm holding the camera. So you would pin, 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 and you can see I've got a good size overlap here. I actually like that. That came out good. But you could have probably cut these 14 or 13 by 22 and not have as big as a flap here if you're short on fabric. You can always lay it out first and see what works. But I'm happy with this. This is a nice overlap. This is about 3 inches, I think. Actually, it's just over 4. That's a good overlap for the back of a pillow. I'll pin everything and show it to you before I stitch it down. I have this half pinned down. I thought I'd explain how I like to sew it. You can sew it any way you want. Some people like to put the whole thing together and do one run around. I do mine a little differently. I find I get better results this way. I'm going to run top to bottom, and I'll back tack it on each end. Then I'll run this way, back tack it here, and go this way and back tack it here. And then I'll put the second piece on. I'll pin it just like this. I'll sew down this side. I'll sew toward the center. And I'll sew toward the center. I forgot to mention I'm doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's on my sewing machine needle plate here. I just want to make sure I've got the pom trim being stitched down and I don't run over my pom-poms. If you need to change your seam allowance to something else, that's fine. It's your pillow. My backing is on. I've stitched all the way around. Before I flip it, I'm going to go ahead and cut the little corner extra, a little bit of extra fabric off before I flip it, and then we'll flip it right side out and we'll put our pillow insert inside. Everything is turned inside out. I used my little purple Thang, poked out the corners. Let's flip it over. It's so pretty. This is going to look great. I'm going to get my pillow form and we'll put the pillow form inside. Here's our completed pillow. Isn't it beautiful? I've got it in my corner chair. This is where I do my stitching and my reading at the end of the night before bed. Oh, it's so pretty. I hope you've enjoyed making this project with me. Please like the video and subscribe. Click the bell for notifications. I'm going to be doing more Kimberbell embroidery projects and more sewing and craft projects. I'm bringing lots of fun stuff to the channel. I hope you will like, subscribe, and share. Give me some feedback if you like in the comments below. Thanks for making the pillow with me. Bye, everybody.